This entire structure isn't real. There's not a situation in which there's the alpha male, the beta male, the zeta male in the corner, the omicron male confused, the lambda male having the time of his life swinging his around. Like, none of that is real. It's all nonsense. We reinforce these stereotypes again and again in our society, and it's damaging to all involved.
3 kids there to perform CPR, and he was barely breathing and bleeding.
That deadly attack in Toronto. At least 10 people are dead.
A majority of the injured victims are women.
Elliot Roger here. I will slaughter every single spoiled, stuck-up, blonde slut.
Police calling it premeditated mass murder.
In 2014, Elliot Roger murdered 6 people in a terror attack in California. Prior to the attack, Roger released a video claiming his actions were intended to punish women for not wanting to sleep with him, and men he considered more sexually successful.
22 years old, and I'm still a virgin. This is my last video. Tomorrow is the day of retribution.
The following years saw a series of deadly attacks across the US, Canada, and Europe, all perpetrated by young men angry at their lack of sexual fulfillment, with many explicitly citing Roger as an inspiration.
He zigzagged from the street onto the sidewalk, hunting his targets, opened fire, wounding 5 and killing 2 women.
An eyewitness said a lone shooter kicked down the door of a house in southwest England, then continued down the street firing indiscriminately.
What's often been missed, however, is how these sexual anxieties and frustrations feed into right-wing extremist political ideology. Online communities which mix toxic misogyny, conspiracy theory, and fears around sexual inadequacy have become a key recruiting ground for right-wing extremist ideologies. This is why the far right are so weird about sex.
This is going to be a very interesting one, especially in light of the amount of shootings that are taking place. I saw someone post a picture the other day that they were like, if you look at the profiles of the majority of mass shooters, they're usually men. A lot of them are young men. And there's usually an overlap between different categories of white supremacy, extreme misogyny, stuff of that nature. And then there's, of course, this weird element of why the far right for so long is absolutely obsessed with sex. You don't have to go to like the Proud Boys or stuff like that to see where this stuff originates, right? Right-wing commentators, even just right-wing politicians, it's typically preaching about abstinence, typically preaching about that you should not engage in sexual activity until you're married, typically that masturbation is a sin. The Proud Boys take things a couple steps further. You are not allowed to masturbate. John Doyle tries to basically preach and propagandize to his followers that you shall not coom, no one should coom, all this kind of stuff. And we are looking at the stats to see that we are going into a new generation where Zoomers are having progressively less and less sexual activity than other generations, and this is specifically affecting men. It's affecting women as well, but it's a difference of about 10 percentage points between the two groups. And one of the big problems that I've kind of found is that in our approach to a lot of these topics, people get turned off from listening to lefties or progressive people when it comes to these issues, and I'm going to personally blame the liberals for everything, because it's just it's the way, you know. This is the way, so we should go forth. But what I mean by that is not just to meme and, you know, get the fucking libs out of your systems, everybody. Come on, you can light up the chats with fucking libs. But a lot of progressive movements, civil rights movements, they eventually got adopted by NGOs, and they also got adopted by the liberal aesthetic. A lot of the things that used to be things that were advocated for, broadly speaking, on the left, in terms of the emancipation of various marginalized groups, have now been taken on by corporations and liberals, which is why you will see someone like the Vice President of the United States go out onto a stage and say, my pronouns are her, you know, and things like that. You will see the CIA doing what are called woke ads. You will see the FBI doing woke ads. You'll see the US military, the largest and most destructive force globally, doing ads that are very pro-LGBTQ plus all of a sudden. They've co-adopted all of this, and they use it as an issue. And the messaging that was once strongly advocated for by the feminist movement has again been co-adopted by both corporate media and a lot of liberal media as well. And a very big problem about that is that if you are someone who is young, and most likely you are a young white male, and you are having a very hard time because high school is fucked up for everybody, and it's fucked up for a variety of reasons. And if you're being told by one side of the political aisle consistently, because again, like liberals and Democrats make up the majority of the other half of politics in the US as opposed to the right, and people can align themselves in the center for sure. But if you hear on a regular basis the messaging that men are violent, men are rapists, men are the problem, men are blah, 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 men are this, men are that, men are this, well then those people are obviously going to turn far away from that, and they're going to look towards other things to direct their anger. Their anger that is largely being reinforced, unfortunately, by things like patriarchy, things like a system that tries to encourage men on a regular basis to value their own worth based on their ability to have sexual conquests and succeed under capitalism. That's what it reinforces on a regular basis. You have to be the breadwinners, the bread earners, and you also have to be the people who have the most sex compared to anyone else. So this combines into a psyche that is very damaging to young boys, especially with the vilification of virgins, which is a really big thing. What are you, a virgin? You're a virgin? Yeah, you're a virgin because you're gay. Oh my God, you're gay. That's the worst thing you could possibly be. You're a gay virgin, blah, blah, blah. That gets reinforced every single time. They go to school, they hate themselves, they hate their lives, they go online, and they find communities that don't say those kind of things. They find communities that say, hey, you're not alone. You're not the only one. There's a lot of us. There's a lot of us, and guess what? I bet you didn't know this, but there's an entire system that you're unaware of. There's a system of Chads and Stacys, of sub-5s, you know? There's the people with the aesthetically pleasing perfect jawlines. They get all the women. And then there's the 7s and the 8s. Those are the boys who can get some women if they work really hard or if they're a little bit wealthy. And then there's the rest of us. The rest of us who will never have sex against our will, because we have to reinforce this misogynistic idea inside you that women are there for denying you sex. That's basically their purpose, and this is why the world is fucked, and this is why it sucks. And you get sucked into those communities of extreme misogyny. There's not a lot of alternatives, because when they look to any other place, what are they seeing? They're seeing people yelling at them from the other direction. So they will choose the community that is more welcoming to them. They will choose the community that all of a sudden makes them feel like they have some form of a connection in an otherwise isolated world. And it continues and reinforces itself. Now, I'm not going to say that there's not a ton of other factors. There obviously is. Our addiction to social media cannot be understated. The fact that we spend more time online, the fact that there is less interaction in real world spaces, and that continues to reinforce itself. That makes it more and more difficult for people to meet themselves. Hookup culture on apps is the absolute worst, and it certainly doesn't help to dispel any of the rumors that these people might be lying to them about on a regular basis. But it also, as I'm sure you'll see in what they're about to talk about, is a very effective recruiting tool for the far right.
Incels are just one branch of a much larger online subculture known as the Manosphere, comprised of many different groups, all with one thing in common: the belief that men are the victims of a society set up to favor women.
Within the Manosphere, there are different factions and different beliefs. With pickup artists, they believe that they can manipulate women into being romantically interested.
I usually have 3 renditions. One for the girls that are ripe and ready. Those girls, less is more. Looking at you and say, oh, who are you? You say, I'm the guy you're kissing now. And you go in.
There are men going their own way who generally refuse to interact, work with women.
I found that you guys are just not extreme enough. You're not going far enough. Men must go our own way. We must separate from the world of women and government.
I think they are all focused on the idea of males losing traction. I think this group of men in particular feels particularly left behind.
What unites all these groups is their virulent misogyny and hatred of feminism. They believe that feminism has ruined modern society by creating a world in which women are supposedly equal agents, thus denying men the dominance they believe is not only natural, but essential for their happiness.
Feminism is seen as something that's eroding the rights of the white man. And so it has allowed both incels and the far right to create an enemy, to create an outgroup, and feminism and women fit relatively neatly into that framing.
I'm now trying to turn this tables of equality on the feminazis who have changed this country.
A disgusting communist, anti-Trump, female feminist got a taste of the gender equality that they clamored for at the...
And the really shitty thing about all this, and the reason why I'm really happy to see that there is starting to be a pushback from the left in creating positive space for men, is that they dominate this sphere. And it's not just the far right, by the way. Those groups that you saw, pickup artists, for example, the MGTOW community, the Red Pill community, they dominate the sphere about speaking about issues related to men's liberation or men's rights or anything like that. And there are an enormous amount of things plaguing the men of this world, and there's a lot of things that need to be talked about and a lot of things that need to be explored and brought up honestly. And the honest answer to a lot of them is that they are reinforced by a system of patriarchy itself. I know that sounds weird, but patriarchy is damaging to men as well. It creates this kind of shit. But because they dominate that sphere, people are going to get pulled into it, and it overlaps with so many other groups that are very dangerous.
women's.
And yes, we cannot promote that Reddit thread enough. Reddit.com/r/menslib, the best Reddit thread for men talking about men's issues from an intersectional feminist perspective, non-judgmental. People can go in there and you can drop all of your things. You can go in there as a full-on incel and say, hey, by the way, I heard about this Reddit thread, but you know, I really hate women, and I think all these Stacys are denying me sex, and they treat me like a sub-3, and I don't know what to do. And they, in a non-judgmental way, will break everything down about what I just said and explain why every part of that is wrong, and try to build them back up and create them in create better men out of it.
March. I thought women were so strong. I thought women were so strong and empowered.
Feminism is cancer. Thank you very much.
This is where the Manosphere starts to bleed into the broader conservative movement and becomes a key recruiting ground for the far right.
The internet has created people that may not have otherwise had the opportunity to meet without technology. So we've seen this in other arenas with hate groups and organizations.
I like women, but I'm self-conscious because of childhood bullying. Yeah, and I totally get that. And honestly, that combined with rejection, anyone here who's been rejected knows it is the worst feeling in the world. It makes you lose your own self-worth because you feel like, wow, why don't they like me? I assumed they would like me. Is it something wrong with me? Is it something? And usually it's because they either like someone else, or they're just not interested, or they don't feel a connection, whatever the case may be. But all of us take it personally. I know every single time I've ever been rejected, it's a huge blow. It's one of those things that it's unfortunate, but the reality of the situation with the rejection is that it gets easier every time. Eventually, it becomes something where you just can brush off a lot more than you could, rather than just become devastated by it. But again, there has to be places for people who are in that situation to go. There has to be places where people feel safe talking about that, because one of the worst fucking things concerning men is the inability for men to talk about their feelings or emotions. It really fucking sucks. You're seen as weak, you're seen as lesser than, you're seen as a coward, and you're seen as a baby, because real men are strong men. Real men dominate. Real men are alphas. Real men have a presence. They get into a room, they flex their fucking muscles, and everyone knows an alpha is in the room and behaves accordingly, because we have an alpha among us, so we have to treat it like such. When really, I mean, the Among Us works because it's sus. This entire structure isn't real. There's not a situation in which there's the alpha male, the beta male, the zeta male in the corner, the omicron male confused, the lambda male having the time of his life swinging his dick around. None of that is real. It's all nonsense. We reinforce these stereotypes again and again in our society, and it's damaging to all involved.
Through recruiting.
Some analysts have suggested that those most likely to join extremist movements are often not the most marginalized in society, but those who feel their positions of relative privilege are under threat. This tallies with an anxiety among some.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I know you're all Sigmas. I didn't want to harp on you, okay? I know you're all Sigmas. I know you've got that Sigma grind set. Good on you. It's the work ethic we need under capitalism. We need a lot of Sigmas. Capitalism requires Sigmas to exist.
Some men that their historically dominant role is being eroded, and among white supremacists that the white race is under threat from minority groups.
Birth rates are falling apart, or we're losing our nations, we're being flooded with immigrants.
We think of threats in terms of intent and capability. And the nexus where intent and capability meet, that's where you're really in danger. With incels, you always have a high intent. The capability isn't always there. When you have a high intent with not necessarily high capability, that means you have an active threat that you need to be focused on, because if somebody develops that capability, then an attack is pretty much inevitable.
Mass shootings at 2 mosques in the city of Christchurch. At least 49 people are dead, many others seriously wounded.
The gunman moves from room to room, firing his automatic weapon for some 6 minutes, killing at least 41 men, women, and children in the first mosque.
When the white supremacist Brenton Tarrant killed 51 people in Christchurch, New Zealand, he released a self-justifying manifesto. The first line, it's the birth rates.
The birth rates. It's all about the birth rates. That's why there's a lot of overlap, by the way, between the Great Replacement conspiracy theory and the misogynistic crowd. They kind of play one into one. I mean, we do have to kind of abolish the mindset in everyone that we need to have a clear ethno-state, in that any country will lose its essence if it loses a certain demographic of people. It's just violent extremism absurdity on its surface, and utterly ridiculous. We're feeding into it on a regular basis. I mean, look no further than the fact that, like, it's wonderful we live in a day and an age where the Human Genome Project was capable of conclusively demonstrating without a shadow of a doubt that there is no such thing as race, that we are all one race, that race is the human race. So we've made up all these categories of white people, black people, and we kind of used it to justify some pretty atrocious and horrifying things like the North Atlantic slave trade and the subjugation of other groups like indigenous people, for example. It's a lot easier to do if you think of them as a completely separate race from yourself. You can engage in a whole bunch of horrifying atrocities. But the more I think we move ideally towards a collective humanity and understand that we should all be working together regardless of our race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, any of that kind of stuff, the healthier everyone will be in the long run, you know? I'm an involuntary celibate woman named Stacy. Hey, there's something for everybody, you know?
This anxiety over so-called racial fertility runs deep in white supremacist movements, often spilling into unhinged conspiracy theories like the so-called Great Replacement.
Thinking about gender roles is absolutely central to thinking about what fascism is and what far-right politics.
And why they overlap. And again, sorry I'm pausing so much, but these are so many important points that are coming to like a head at this point in history right now, and why it's so important for people to kind of work on both themselves and this messaging, in that we do live in a day and age where, again, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of men who are online consistently and who are young and who feel completely disoriented and disillusioned with the world. And again, I can only relate to how shitty high school was for myself. But if I put myself into a mindset to be in that phase in my life, and then I also had this online world of possibilities where you could find community in other things and find community in groups that also align with the fact that, hey, by the way, have you been rejected before? Yeah, it sucks. And you know what the problem is? It's women. It's women. It's not you. You're not the problem. It's women. And I'm not saying that they are the problem. That's the biggest, paradox of this whole thing. It's not simply that. It's that, like, we have this mindset, and I had it since birth, thanks Disney, by the way, that, like, everybody has a soulmate. And you should be able to get your soulmate, and you should be able to convince your soulmate that they love you, a la The Little Mermaid or Aladdin or any other of the Disney movies. And if you don't do that, well, then you're a failure. And your rejection means that you are ultimately just a terrible person, and then that's it. So you combine that loneliness with people being terminally online and then finding communities where they're like, you don't have to feel lonely. We also experience that. And guess what? Women are the enemy for more reasons than one. You may not know this, but there's an actual whole conspiracy going on in which they're lowering the birth rates because women are selectively breeding with certain individuals, the Chads, as you see, and this is a huge problem in their lives. They need places to go that don't push this fucking toxic bullshit. They need places to go that don't reinforce all of this horrifying stuff, because the worst conclusion that it reaches is mass shooters. Is mass violence. Is people who are at a breaking point, and then all of a sudden they're ready to commit acts of violence against the groups that they think are endangering them. And that could be women, that could be Muslims, that could be black people, that could be indigenous. It doesn't matter. That's going to be the end of the road at all of this. I should be married before 30. No, we have to smash down all these ideas. You don't have to get married at all. But if you do, fine. You could also marry a dude. Totally acceptable and awesome and based. You could also not marry a dude and be in a polyamorous relationship with a woman and a man. You could also be in a relationship with a non-binary individual. Could be sexy as fuck. Who knows? There shouldn't be a one-size-fit-all. Like, that's kind of the problem with the way this is constantly reinforced in us. And it's like, well, you know, we all believe in the family and the family dynamic. The family dynamic doesn't have to be in that shape or form. It doesn't have to take this one man, one woman, 2.5 kids, dog picket fence bullshit. And then everyone who can achieve that, because that's becoming increasingly more difficult. Home ownership is very, very hard. I rent in this apartment. So what happens when I feel like less of a man because I'm not able to buy a house by the time I'm 40? What happens when I feel like less of a man because I'm not able to find a woman? Because every time I engage with a woman, I talk to women as if they're just a series of ones and zeros, and that they either have to give me the sex or not give me the sex. And then lo and behold, that just kind of makes people very uncomfortable around you when you're consistently talking to them as if they're sex vessels rather than human beings. Why is it the only interactions I'm supposed to have with women are interactions that should lead to sex or getting something? Because otherwise there's no point. I shouldn't even engage with women to have a pleasant conversation or enjoy them as people or have a conversation with them as another human being. All of this just continuously gets reinforced, and we get stuck in these holes, and all of a sudden people get trapped, and the only way out is to commit acts of violence. And again, it's reinforced by it's hard. This is such an uphill battle because we're against fucking mainstream society. This is what mainstream society says you should do to become successful in life, and tons of people, myself included, buy into it. You have to be really good at your job. You have to have a high-paying job. You have to get promoted over your other co-workers. You have to be a provider for your family. Women don't want a beta who doesn't make a lot of money and provides no value, so get in there, and that's how you get the alpha Stacies. Then when you get a Stacy who's of a really high value and everyone else wants to have sex with her, but they can't because she's going to become yours and only yours, and you have to lock her down and all this other kind of shit. Again, reinforcing it over and over and over again.
Because you can't really think race without thinking reproduction.
There's an obvious crossover here with many religious conservatives, men's rights activists, and incel communities. It comes down to controlling women's bodies and insecurities about them choosing other sexual partners.
On the forums, there are many discussions about what women should and should.
Okay, wait, hold on. Wears tons of makeup because of her low self-esteem, damaged hair from overdying, got a crappy flower tattoo when she was 17, uses fake tanner so dark looks Mexican, improved her self-esteem and only wears chubby from her diet of fast food and microwave meals, aborted her black baby last year, yikes! Wears clothing that barely fits her, is only attracted to black men, works a minimum wage job because a gender studies degree didn't get her anywhere. Loves her natural face and only wears light makeup. Her husband works to support her, staying at home and raising the kids. In 20s, but already married with kids. Loves her family, race, and country in that order. Family, race, country. Holy shit, this is white nationalist fucking horrors beyond belief. Natural hair for the highlights from the sun. Talk about Aryan bullshit. Natural tan from her outdoor lifestyle. Wears modest and feminine clothing. Slim figure from her healthy homemade meals and active lifestyle. I mean, who finds the time? I mean, this sounds, to be the Aryan woman's dream, this sounds incredibly exhausting, you know? People gotta work 2 jobs these days. How am I supposed to do an Uber shift and still have the time to make those healthy homemade meals and then go for 2 jogs to be able to be slim enough for you? Homeschools her kids so they aren't taught progressive BS in school. Knowledge about her European roots. You know what? You check all the boxes, all right? You're slim because of your healthy diet and the fact that you exercise a lot, and your hair is golden from the sun ordained by God. But I have to ask, how much do you know about your European roots? Are you proper Judeo-Christian Aryan, or are we dealing with, is there a little bit of Polish in there? I don't want to, I mean, I'm sorry. I could accept maybe like 10%, but you know, once we get into like the Slavic region, then then things are going to kind of fall apart. You need to be pure is what I'm saying. Like the driven snow.
There are many discussions about...
The one on the left seems more fun. You know, they're both going to be, I'm sure, a blast as long as we get rid of all of this. As long as we erase all of the text and they were just like, here's a couple of women, then I think we're doing a lot better.
What women should and shouldn't do. that they are looking for a woman who will stay at home, raise their children, kind of be barefoot in the kitchen and cook. But at the same time,
guys, they're drawings. Have you not seen in Japan how people can actually marry drawings and pillows and toys now? It's a thing. The future is wonderful and
they
wild.
still refer to women using these degrading sexual terms.
Women, their physical fitness and their beauty and perfection and everything that they are expected to do is very much oriented around a passionate and beautiful submission to the joys of motherhood and domesticity, so that they can take on one of the most important roles, the reproduction of the race, the reproduction of the nation.
Jews will not replace us!
If you use the term replacement, if you suggest that the Democratic Party is trying to replace the current electorate, the voters now casting ballots, with new people, more obedient voters from the third world.
But it's not just women.
According to my genetics, I'm 100% Aryan, strawberry blonde, blue eyes, and will never ever give them a baby. Why are you denying them the master race? I cannot give this advice more strongly, especially in light of all this kind of stuff. And this one is for the men, because I can't relate. I don't know what it's like to be a woman. I don't know what it's like to be non-binary. But I understand, fellas, how all encapsulating or almost like possessing it can feel sometimes when you're speaking to a beautiful woman and your mind is just thinking, wow, you are so gorgeous, so unbelievably beautiful, and you're just, it almost feels like you're entranced by them, by you know, the sheer power of how much you're attracted to them. And I'm sorry, this definitely wouldn't apply to people who are ace or aromantic. I understand that, but the idea that you should deal with interactions with other human beings with the sole thing in your mind of thinking, how can we get together? Not even for sex, like how can I make you my girlfriend, or how can we become into a relationship, is ultimately going to be self-destructive to you, because people do not want to engage on a regular basis with people who are just obsessing over being with them or having sex with them. It's going to make conversations very difficult, and it's probably going to make it so people don't want to talk to you, and you'll feel more isolated. What is way healthier is just to start realizing that you can have conversations with women that will never lead to any kind of romantic relationship or sexual relationship, because guess what? They're people just like you. So a lot of them are going to have a lot of the same likes. A lot of them are going to have completely different likes than you. A lot of them may enjoy things like video games. Some of them will hate things like video games, but they may introduce you to a whole world of things that you didn't know was possible. Just getting and normalizing talking to people without the idea that women, their only object is to be a conquest by you, would make everything infinitely more healthy. And guess what? You will slowly, over time, and this just happens naturally, start to pick up and when people are interested in you. You could be talking to someone for a regular basis 2 or 3 times, and then all of a sudden you start to realize they smile a lot more when they see you. They smile a lot more when they talk to you. It really seems like there's something, you start to feel a connection naturally, things like that. And at which point, yeah, it's totally appropriate to ask if they'd want to go out or something like that, all those kind of things. But until you start just normalizing, again, being normal, having normal conversations, not seeing women as only a sexual conquest for you to have, then you're going to get stuck in this cycle where every single time you talk to someone, it doesn't work, and you get mad, and you feel suddenly that something is wrong with you and that they are keeping something from you. There's something that they are keeping their bodies from you, and you are owed that, because at the end of the day, that is how. And once you add this philosophy into it, once you add the entire thing that this is actually going to overlap with things about diminishing birth rates and all that kind of fucked up shit, well, yeah, you're so far down the rabbit hole that you're completely lost. When honestly, talking to anybody, having engagement with anybody, you know what it's like. You've had it before when you talk to someone and it makes you feel awkward. You don't want to be there anymore, right? Who wants to sit there and have conversations with someone who is acting and making them feel bad? People don't like feeling bad. People don't want to be in a conversation with someone who's just constantly eyeing them and trying to figure out what is the Konami code to unlock their bodies, right? It's not going to make anybody pleasant to be around on a regular basis. Normalize being normal.
Women's sexual choices that right-wing movements seek to control.
Oh yeah, and no one should depend on someone else for their orgasms. It's true. Guess what? We have the ability to give ourselves orgasms. Post-nut clarity is a beautiful thing. Don't believe all these weird-ass proud boys who are telling you, you must never cum. There's definitely a difference between becoming addicted to pornography and masturbation. Those are real things, and one of the worst parts about porn, and I am definitely an advocate of, I think porn's totally fine. People should be able to watch it. But they create very unrealistic expectations of what everyone everyone should be looking for. You're looking at people whose professional jobs are to be the greatest sex havers on the planet. They are going to be muscular and shredded. They're going to have monster dongs. They're going to have huge tits, huge asses, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's fun. I'm not saying anything's wrong with enjoying porn from time to time, but don't make that the be-all end-all of your ability to engage sexually. What you should do is normalize masturbation, normalize it, because it is a completely healthy, normal activity that people can do. And again, post-nut clarity is a very important thing, especially if you are going to try and, let's say, get a clear head on a certain item or something like that. But also, don't look towards porn as the way all sex is. Some sex can be like porn, certainly can, but porn again is professionals doing things at, like, you know, these are sex workers doing their work at the highest level. So it's not going to be the vast majority of your sexual experiences. I mean, some of your first sexual experiences will probably be awkward. You're figuring things out. That's what it's all about. It's about figuring some stuff out. If you're with someone who cares about you, won't make a difference at all, and you'll get to become better. Want to know how to get better at pleasing the opposite sex, whether they are men, women, non-binary? Talk to your partners. Ask what they like. Ask what they're into. You know, that's the best way for all of that.
Those of their own members, the Proud Boys, one of the most prominent radical conservative movements in the US, discourages its members from masturbating in a policy known as #NoWanks. #NoWanks is pitched as a way of overcoming porn addiction, developing discipline, and giving members more time to focus on their family.
See, but that goes way too far in the opposite direction. Way too far. Because, like, the no wanks thing and just not masturbating in general, like, you want an anecdote in all this? I knew someone who tried to do that for over a year in high school, and they were an adult, and they started having what are they called? Nocturnal emissions. It was like life finds a way, you know, like at some point or another point, they just started coming in their sleep. Like I think the idea of having a generation of people, especially men, being extremely sexually frustrated, but also unable to satisfy themselves in any way, shape, or form is also very dangerous. I don't want a room full of incels, misogynists, Nazis, racists, whatever it is, who have been buying into all this indoctrination, who on top of everything else are also extremely sexually frustrated. It's not a pleasant combination there.
But policies like these are more than just a bizarre form of self-help. This is about control.
Having daily practices that connect you to a broader movement is a very effective strategy. So
I know someone who did no fap and started doing binaural beats to hands-free cum, but hands-free cumming, that would still, like, oh, is that like a loophole? Like, oh, I didn't fap. I didn't touch myself at all, but it happened.
You're not just...
the loophole has been found.
You're not just saying to people, you know, we're being swamped by immigrants, you know, if the feminists are in charge. It's saying you need to take action daily in your life and you will see the benefits.
It's now time for the return of men.
The 2010s witnessed the rise of the so-called alt-right, and the pipeline between the Manosphere and radical conservative and white supremacist movements went into overdrive.
The online space really is characterized by intermingling between these various factions. And as the factions have intermingled, languages have intermingled, culture has intermingled, jokes have intermingled. And this is partly deliberate because...
Meanwhile, legal brothels can reduce the number of sexual assault charges. It's what my state in Australia. Do you have data on that? Is that true? A legal brothel reduced the amount of people who are committing sexual assault? Etymologically seems super sus. Pornocracy. It's the dominating influence of harlots, used specifically of the control of the government of Rome and the election to the papacy during the first half of the 10th century by the noble, but proliferated Theodora and her daughters. That is weird. Yeah, oh no, I'm 100% for the legalization and unionization of sex workers. Absolutely. It makes it safer for everybody involved.
It makes it much more difficult.
The problem is, like, this has been explored a few times though, like that incels, I think they're specifically told in their communities not to seek out sex workers. It's a form of like cheating, and it doesn't mean that you're still not involuntary celibate. Like they actually, you have to understand that this creates a community for them, right? So for them, this is a sense of belonging. So it's not just about like I had these really radical beliefs and now I'm going to reinforce them with them. It's also like they feel lonely, isolated, and they also feel like they can't find or get into a relationship. Sometimes, I mean, people sometimes are baffled when they see the pictures of you know, incel killers, and they look upon them like, that dude's really good looking. Why the hell? I don't understand any of this. It's because they stay in those circles, that also becomes their social circle and their community, and so they are amongst like-minded people in those circles, and they become excommunicated if they do something like seek out a sex worker.
To draw distinct lines between them, and it means that when an attack happens, it's very difficult to nail down the ideology, and if you can't do that, it's very difficult to nail down the enduring threat.
It's also probably not a coincidence that when one member of the alt-right accuses another of being not committed enough to the cause, the word they use is cuck, a sexual fetish and porn category where men watch their partners have sex with other men.
You are seen as weak, minuscule men. And I tell my boy, men like you, those aren't men. You understand? You will be weak, minuscule men the rest of your lives, and I'm not going to let you influence the other boys in this community to be little cucks.
This is all a pretty neurotic tangle of sexual insecurity manifesting as political ideology. In Russia, the connection has become explicit, with the emergence of the violent extremist group Male State, who literally call their ideology national patriarchy. They're so violent that they've been officially banned in Russia, though they've still emerged as some of the loudest supporters of Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine. This crossover of the Manosphere, sexual anxiety, and the far right can lead to very serious violence. In 2018, Scott Bailey murdered 2 women and injured 4 more at a yoga studio in Florida.
This is brand new video from the scene from just moments ago.
2 of those people died, 21-year-old Maura Binkley and 61-year-old Nancy Van Nessum.
I'd like to talk about mongrelization. When I see an interracial couple, I think one of 2 things. Either the guy couldn't do any better, or the girl's
In 2021, Lyndon McLeod, a rising star in the Manosphere and frequent guest on alt-right podcasts, went on a shooting rampage in Denver, killing 5 people.
Going into a business, holding a gun. Seconds later, he calmly walks out.
3 people were shot and 2 women were killed at that location.
And the list goes on.
5 people of Plymouth who have lost their lives overnight, including a particularly young child.
Again this morning here in the UK, where 6 people have been killed in the worst mass shooting in the country in over a decade.
This all leads to the question, when you see right-wing extremists ranting on YouTube, posing with guns, or marching with tiki torches, are you simply seeing a bunch of scared, sexually insecure men afraid of real contact?
We're, fed a steady diet of particular visions of who we are supposed to be as men, and I think a lot of that kind of that messaging and the sort of problems it creates for society and for young men.
It's not just about controlling women, it's about controlling all people. That's it. That's where the overlap happens.
Leads people to start looking for consistent ways of explaining the world.
But none of these things are going to be solved by scapegoating women and immigrants, wallowing in misogyny on the internet, or most of all, by acts of brutal, nihilistic violence.
True, Vice, but at the end of the day, it's also not going to be solved by simply vilifying all of them and anyone who's like looking for answers online, which I find is kind of like, this is the problem. That's why there has to be places like, again, Reddit/r/men's lib. If you know someone in your life, if you know a man or a boy in your life who seems to be going down the dark path or seems to be going through that kind of stuff, tell them to start participating in that forum rather than participating in the r/women should be our control vessels or whatever, because there's much better support groups. They exist now. They're more necessary than ever, and you can see why all these things overlap and what the problem is. And again, piece of advice, because people are always asking, well, then how exactly do you meet people? 2 things I usually recommend. 1, volunteering can be a really neat way to meet people, but again, don't go into any situation hoping that you are going to meet sexual partners or you're going to meet future romantic partners. Just go into them hoping to meet people. And by meeting people, when you start meeting people, having conversations, normalizing that activity, you will start to find people who become interested in you and vice versa. As well as I just recently started participating in community center activities locally. If you don't have them, I guess this one doesn't apply, but most cities have a community center. Tons of things you can take at a community center, everything from painting to dancing to drawing, whatever your interest may be, to pottery classes, stuff like that. And they are filled with people in their 20s, and they are incredibly social environments. People have to pair up. It breaks you out of your shell if you're someone who has a lot of trouble, because you will be forced to have a little bit of a conversation with someone. Might be scary the first 2 or 3 times you do it. By the 4th course, you're going to be so excited to show up there another time. There's lots of meetup groups online. There's an entire website dedicated to local meetups. I think it's called meetups, but either way, you pick the topic or activity you like. Do you love Twin Peaks? Are you a massive Twin Peaks fan? Do you want to go to a community of people who are also massive Twin Peaks fans in your local area and watch entire seasons of Twin Peaks? That exists, and they have meetups once a week. You didn't know about it, and then when you find out, you show up there, you get to meet a whole bunch of people. You've already got a common ground with every single one of you. All of you have the Twin Peaks lore in your heads, and you then get to talk about it, and sometimes they're very fun social scenarios. But any of those kind of activities usually promotes having conversations with people. The biggest advice I can again impart if you were going into one of those places, especially if you're volunteering, is don't go in them with the mindset, and this is what the pickup artists really fuck up, is that they kind of tell you that everything is a zero-sum game. If you're not having sex with this person, someone else is, so you gotta have sex with all of them. You are the ultimate alpha, all that kind of shit. Go into them just to meet people, period. Don't be afraid of forming friendships with people and then never expecting a romantic relationship or a physical relationship to come from it. Meeting people, making friendships, having platonic friendships can be a beautiful thing. I'm a huge advocate of it. Some of my oldest friends that I still hang out with that I've known since high school are people, happen to be women. I've never had relationships with them before. They're all married now. They have kids, but we still hang out on a regular basis. They're cherished friends of mine. It's not something like... We've kind of got ourselves into this headspace where it has to always be a zero-sum game. It has to always be like, well, I mean, eventually she'll like me, eventually she'll have sex with me or something like that. If you're looking to make relationships and someone's not interested in you, move on to someone else. There's 7 billion human beings on the planet. If that person isn't for you, then that's probably not a person who's for you. And also, what's funny is if you struggle for a long time to get into relationships, like I personally did in high school, when you finally do, and you think that like, oh, okay, I'm in a relationship now. Well, I guess this is it. We're just going to keep on going until the death. You realize after dating a bunch that a lot of people are not good for you, and you'll get into relationships where you're like, this fucking sucks, why am I with this person? The trial and error and exploration of all that will start to make you realize that zero-sum game thing is utter and complete bullshit. You're going to get into relationships with people who are not compatible with you at all, relationships with people who are amazing for you, and then all of a sudden it could be a tragic heartbreak if you guys break up. But it's just something you got to keep going at. And if you are lost, or people who are lost, please direct them to /menslib. It's the one really good men's liberation Reddit thread that I've been able to find to turn men into lambda men, which is our ultimate goal. We have to create a whole series of lefty lambda men for the future.
Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form, available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback, because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
To our gods, Xander Corvus and Peyton L. Just, we are prepared to embark on a mighty jihad in your name. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we are but your humble jester, attempting in vain to get you to laugh. To our valiant knights of the Round Table, Benji Arnie, Tech Tink, Scary Earthhuman, Tony, DM Rivera, Resident Scarecrow, Sir Nickus, Mayred, Cheryl Alvarez, Ruby Kelly, Brandon. Words Greenwood. It doesn't matter what I believe. It only matters what I can prove. Egbert Celine. Matthew Scarborough. Stellar Vision. Ariane McCarthy. Daniel Sutton. Coulter Smith. Jenna Tao. Quiet 185. Anna Loves Riley. Omni. Riley and Anna. Poodlehawk. The Tim Caucus. Multimondi. Trevbot. EXE. Brian Ephraim. Lemmy 101. Anthropophojak. Saren 42. Catherine. Ramona Costa. Incosin. Agent NDN. Violent Orchard. Political Puppy. La Media Panza. Zach Christensen. Todd Buckingham. And Todd Lajeunesse. We raise our mugs and salute our brave heroes off to another glorious conquest.